or something.
Maybe. And Vinod Prabhu, I told you, no, some family problems he's having.
Who? Rajpriya Mataji, yeah?
Oh, no, Vinod Prabhu.
Okay. Mataji, anyway, it is live.
Or something.
Huh?
Maybe. And Vinod Prabhu, I told you, no, some family problems he's having.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay. Just go back. Zoom. Yeah. So I learned the trick of doing the share now. So just 3 of us. It's okay. Go ahead. We'll do the Mangalacharana. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjala Shalakaya Chakshurammunimilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kadamahim Dadati Swapadantika Vandeyaham Shri Guruhu Shri Yudapadakapanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sa Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatham Tamsa Jivam Sadavaitam. Sorry, yeah. Vandeyaham Shri Guruhu Shri Yudapadakapanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sa Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatham Tamsa Jivam Sadavaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchan Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshri Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhya Chakrapa Sindhubhya Vaja Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Hare Krishna. Okay, we'll quickly go through yesterday's session. Yesterday's session, we were able to cover only around, I think just four verses. Not too good. We'll try and do more today. Okay, so we discussed the tree of life, which is the upside down tree. And the Lord says this is a perverted reflection. And this tree stands on the lake of our desires. And then the desires are responsible for us for all the kind of attachments and aversions that living entities create for themselves, and based on the activities that they engage in while being in this material world, dictates or leads to the transmigration of or leads to the new bodies that the living entities get or probably seek because of their desires, and accordingly a body is assigned to them so that they can fulfill all that they want. But however, it also kind of has the component of the karma, the virtues and the vices. So depending on that, they meet with the good and bad in all forms of life. And then he also talks about the importance of detachment. So unless one is able to cut off these attachments, he uses the word asanga shastrena, with that acts of detachment, it is unlikely that one will be able to get out of this constant cycle of birth and death. And then he also talks about, he talks about how to detach. And now today we're going to look at, okay, fine. We know about this tree now. We also know that detachment is a very important component. And then the Lord also says that you have to really ensure that you're able to effectively do it. Now, how does one do it is what he's going to explain. What are those qualities that will help us to kind of attain that permanent abode of that Lord, which is that Paramadhama. And what is so important about, okay, fine, I love this material world. So what is so special about that material, of that spiritual world that the Lord is talking about? So he's going to talk about both. He's going to tell us about the special qualities that one needs to get, or one needs to practice, or one needs to engage in, or one needs to learn, one needs to realize, one needs to execute it, not just once a while, but always, make it a habit, because it's because of our samskaras, it is who we are, and therefore these samskaras have to be changed and new habits have to be developed, and he talks about those qualities. 15.5. And then he's going to very briefly speak about that abode from where no one returns. Remember yesterday we were just as we were parting, we said that very many people always say that, okay, whatever goes up has to come down. But once one reaches that Paramadhama, there's no return at all, because there's nothing like gravity that which works here doesn't work there. So it's only the foolish who doesn't understand. They think, the force of gravity exists everywhere. So let's go to the 15.5. Okay. So here the Lord speaks about the 5 qualities. Nirmana moha. There are 2 things here. False prestige and illusion. Those who are free from nirmana moha, jita sanga dosha, that is false association, adhyatma nitya, vinivritta kamaha, dvandair vimuktaha, sukha dukkha samnair, gachanti amudaha, padam avyayam tat. He said that dham can only be, tat means that, to attain or to get into that eternal kingdom of whom? Of that Supreme Person. So, one who is free from false prestige and illusion, nirmana and moha, and who is free from false association, unnecessary attachments or attachments that will lead to more attachments and more aversions, and therefore engage in activities that might either be virtuous or not so virtuous. And one who understands that eternal adhyatma nitya, that eternal, who is always permanent and eternal, and who are done with the material lust, vinivarta kamaha, who are done with their all kinds of desire, any desire, all those material pursuits, of artha, karma, dharma, one who is done with all of that, and who are freed from the dualities of happiness, the dvandas, one who is freed of sukha dukkha, who is equal in all kinds of situations, and who is unbewildered, gachanti amudaha, doesn't get swayed by the work of Maya, who is able to control their senses, who do not allow the sense objects to allow them to get out of their realm of austerity. Such a person or such people are the ones who will know how to surrender to the Supreme. So these are qualities of one who really has that motive to serve the Lord. So the service motive comes only when one does not have any expectations. One is very detached. One does not, one engages in all kinds of activities, but does not build attachment to them. And one who is equal, or one who is able to maintain a balance in all kinds of situations. Such a person would know how to surrender to that Supreme Person. So how do you reach that Padam Avyayam, which is that eternal abode of the Lord? It's only through the process of surrender. It's the faith which is very, very important. Faith leads to devotion. When you have faith, that utmost faith in that Supreme Lord, it helps you to develop attitudes of serving. So faith is very important. So here, I want us to read Prabhupada's purport. Just a little portion. Let me go to that. Only a small portion. We will read a small portion, okay? Hare Krishna, Kedar Prabhu. Good to see you today. Okay. So let's go to Veda base.
Hare Krishna Mataji. I'm sorry, I'm out actually. That's why I couldn't join.
No problem, Prabhuji. Nice to see you. So far.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. So, I want us to read just a small portion. That's a very nice one. This one. This last line, I'll just read it. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. In fact, if you read the Ishopanishad, there is so much that Prabhupada talks about how people hanker for properties, how people hanker for assets, whilst none of it is actually ours. All the resources have been bountifully been provided for. In fact, Ishopanishad says that this world is Purna because it comes from one who is actually Purna. The world is holistic, the world is whole, the world has everything that it needs. Why so? Because it has been given to us by someone who has everything and doesn't need anything or anything of what we think, we want to kind of hoard more and more. So Prabhupada gives the example of capitalists and communists, and he just beats them both. He says the capitalist wants to take more and more. That oligarchy system, they just want to become powerful, more and more powerful. Whereas the communists think they're going to take away or they're going to fight with them and then take and then go about distributing. So Prabhupada says, who are we to distribute what we don't own? Who are we to hanker for things which doesn't belong to us anyways? And similarly, who are we to think that we are giving something to somebody? So one has to therefore cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own. What is our own? Our own is that where we can actually engage in activities that will help us to close our distance between where we are and the Supreme Lord. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. Then it is possible for him to surrender to that Supreme Lord. So surrendering requires us to rebalance ourselves, reassess, rebalance, and evaluate ourselves at every step. And that's why what helps us in that process are the services that are listed as part of devotional service, of which Shravanam and Kirtanam. Hearing and engaging in conversations, discussions from authoritative sources, as what we are right now doing, reading Prabhupada and understanding the Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures that Prabhupada strongly recommends us to have as a companion, is very important. Yeah. Hare Krishna, is that okay? So that is how, it's only through the process of surrender that we can reach the Paramadhama of the Lord. Now, why it is so special about that Paramdham? That abode of mine is not illumined by the sun. Here we need everything. The Lord had to provide everything for us because there is a certain biorhythm that as the species of the material world has to engage in activities, and therefore this abode of this material world has all these things like sun, moon, rain, monsoon, changes and everything else. So that abode of mine, he's trying to say, look, that why should you look for that, or what is that abode all about? That abode is always illumined because everyone is in the pure Shuddha Sattva Guna. They are Nirguna. They transcended all these kind of things. They're beyond all these gunas. So that world doesn't need all this artificial because it is the world of the Lord. It's his energy which is giving us what we have here. So what is different about that? Whatever goes up falls down in our world. But there, when one reaches that world, never returns to the material world because you are completely free from all kinds of contamination. It's only the contamination keeps us in this material world. But one who's free from the contamination is nobler, is diviner. So once you kind of, imbibe the qualities that we saw there, you become divine. When I say divine, you look for a higher taste. You look for things which are more engaging, more meaningful, more, I won't say intellectual, but more meaningful, more engaging, something that makes you understand the value of things around you. So it is divinity scores over worldliness, the pleasures of. See, worldliness definitely has, when you have everything, worldliness seems to be the best thing that can be for anybody, right? I'm talking about one who has everything. They have everything going right for them. Everything is great. But there is something even more sublime and even more superior. Something which is more noble. Something that gives you even more that power of the power and strength. Yeah, to set goals that will actually help you to kind of disengage from these things which are not permanent, which are temporary, and which has all kinds of things which are not going to be so, which are not always going to be exciting, which are not always going to be satisfying, which are not always going to be giving you, fulfilling your expectations. So, once one reaches that abode, this material world is a perverted reflection, where one has to constantly look at hopping from one branch to another branch and seek out, what do I want? And develop greater and greater attachment. Once that surrendering process happens, and one is able to fly up, breaking this coconut shell into that abode of the Lord, that is a place to be, because from there, the need to come will not be there, because you become nirguna. It's only because of the gunas we are here. Okay. So this is what Prabhupada said in a lecture, which of course I picked up from one of the slides of Pran Prabhu. So why should you pay the electric bill? So this is what he says in relation to this particular verse. What is this foolishness? Why should you pay the electric bill? Go there and live there. So Prabhupada is telling people, he's in a lecture. He said, here you have to pay electric bill, you have to pay for water, you have to pay, probably a day will come when we have to pay for the air, which we did during the COVID times, if you knew, if you remember the kind of problems people faced in terms of running around for, oxygen concentrators and that and this. I remember even I was also helping people doing all that. So we had to pay for it, and oxygen concentrators were being sold at even, I think, 3 times, 4 times the price of the oxygen concentrator itself. So Prabhupada says, what is this foolishness? Why should you pay electric bill? Go there and live there. That world is illumined. There is no need. Natat bhashyate. It is a spiritual world. It is not lighted by the sun and moon. We don't have to hanker for resources. I heard one of the countries, our neighbor, China, is going to into the outer space and is targeting asteroids because it wants to bring in resources from there, so that the natural resources in the Earth planet can be retained. So we don't have to do all that, Prabhupada says, because everyone is effulgent, everyone is completely satisfied and fulfilled. Nobody is comparing, nobody is competing there. Competition exists in this world. Comparison exists in this world. I have this, you don't have this. Because everyone is effulgent, every planet is effulgent. So therefore, there's no need of these things. There is no ignorance there. Here, it is because of avidya, we are hankering. But once, when there is knowledge, what is knowledge? Whatever you saw in 5.5 is knowledge. When there is vidya, when there is knowledge, there's no hankering. So everyone there is highly intellectual. They have strong sense control of everything. So very many people think spiritual world is a world where you don't have to do anything. Oh, spiritual world, time and again, Prabhupada says, you have spiritual activities. You are engaged in spiritual activities. You are engaged in, in serving the Lord. In material world, we serve ourselves. So there in the spiritual world, there's no ignorance, there is no avidya, there is no scarcity. There's absolutely abundance of everything, because that's the place where the energy is situated. There's no miserable condition. Here, this world is dukhalaya. That world is sukham. And that sukham is imperishable. Okay, so this section that we saw the tree of life, 15.1, and we saw the importance of detachment, and how to detach is what we saw in 15.3 and 15.4. And then we also saw the qualities to attain the permanent abode and the speciality of that permanent abode. Now we are going to go into the next section of this chapter. This chapter had 4 sections. We are going to go into the next section, which is transmigration of living entities. Remember, the branches going up and down had different entities seated on the different, the upper branches are the people who are the exalted or the evolved souls, who are the demigods or the devis and devatas, who supply us with all the requirements that we need. And then the mid branches are the ones where the human species of life exist. And then the lower branches are all about the lower species. So how does this transmigration happen is what is the Lord is going to explain that in detail. So 15.7 talks about that the Lord doesn't disown us. Let's understand that very well. He loves all the species sitting across all the branches. And he says, all the living entities are my eternal fragments. They are mine. He's proud of each one of us. And 15.8 and 9, he says, living entities are transient. We are transitory birds. We take up different bodies based on the good and bad that we do and our own desires. 15.10 and 12 talks about, or rather 15.12 talks about the one who is self-realized, one who understands this tree, one who understands this Ashwatha tree, is the one who understands this and is able to conquer or is able to transcend this process of transmigration. Okay, so let's look at 15.7. Very, very nice shloka. This is also a memorization shloka. Mamaiva amsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manahasashtan indriyani prakritistani karshati. There are 2 words which are very important. One is mama. Mamaiva amsho. He says each one is mine. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Eternal. At not one point in time, he says, these living entities are not mine. They are my eternal fragmental part. They will always remain mine. Whether they choose to be in the lower branch or the mid branch or the higher branch, they are mine, the Lord says. But due to the conditioned life, all kind of conditioning. What is conditioning? Attachments and aversions. They're struggling very hard. Karshati. They're struggling. Karshati, I have an underlined karshati. Let me do it now. Karshati means struggling. Okay, they're struggling hard. They're struggling hard with what? They're struggling hard with all their desires and thereby facing the music of their desires. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to the conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So the mind is very, very potent. The mind can control the senses. And when the mind controls the senses, the intellect gets into its act. Okay. So now the key points, that's a large purport. So I've just, picked up a few points, but we'll read one section of that purport, if that's okay with you. Hare Krishna. Is it okay? It's very
Yes, Mataji.
We'll just read one section of the purport, but I give you the key points, and whenever you find time, please read the purport. It's very nice. So the Prabhupada says, the living entity is an eternal part of the Supreme. Will always be. It is always eternal part of the Supreme, and it will always be. And the Lord has his expansions, which are called Vishnu Tattva. Vishnu Tattva has his own expansion that he takes, his own avatars. There are two parts. One is his own expansion, the other is the Jivas. So we are so important. The living entities are so very precious to the Lord. The Vishnu Tattvas are the avatars of the Lord, like Rama, Narasimha, and all the personalities. And all of them, all the personalities that live in the various Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual world. They're all the Vishnu Tattvas. They're also part and parcel of him. They've all come from him. They're all his energy. The Jiva Tattvas are separated expansions and eternal survival. We shall always be in the position of serving the Lord. We are qualitatively the same as the Lord, but we are quantitatively, he is who he is. We are just one small size, one atom of his. And therefore, every living entity has its own identity and minute independence. Remember, I told you the story. Each one of us have our own independence. And this was the story I told you about from Uddhava Gita, where the Lord was eagerly waiting for the Pandava brothers to call on him so that he could play against Shakuni. And the Mahabharata war probably wouldn't have happened had it happened that way. But it was not meant to be that way. Because the Jivas, present in the form of the five Pandavas, chose to take things in their own hand. So, the minute independence the Lord gave them. He said, okay, go play. And they lost. And they bore the brunt of that loss in terms of Agyatavas, in terms of, the ignominy or the shame that their own wife had to undergo. Of course, they were also at fault, right? They also pawned their wife. It just shows to what extent the human intellect can fall down. Their intellect fell down to such a level that they didn't even think twice. Okay, fine, you pawned your kingdom, you pawned your crown, you pawned yourself. But you also went to the extent of pawning your wife. So that it shows the dangers involved in our attachments. For what? Attachments to show that we are superior. He could have always said, I'm sorry, if we lost it, we are going. There was no need to have done so much. You lost everything, you lost yourself. Okay, he could have become a slave. But who was he to go and, put his wife on the table? That's what he did. And that's what is happening in Kali Yuga, right? So the Lord, all those things, Mahabharata, are being told and retold again and again to us because it tells us it's not only they who did it, but we are also doing it right now. We are also capable of doing it if we haven't. Because the human intellect is so frail. When in distress, you just don't know how it behaves. And we've all gone through it, right? So that minute independence is what caused the Mahabharata war. And the Lord had to come and set it right. So therefore, proper use of independence aids in liberation. What do we want? We want moksha. So when we use that independence in the right way, then moksha automatically has to happen. So Prabhupada says Karshati is a very important term. Because we're all struggling hard with multiple things around us. Whether it be business, whether it be a profession, whether it be a family, whether it be a relationships. And all of them lead from one to the other. And we have discussed this several times. So this constant struggle with the various variables around us draws the living entity into cycles. Because we get into some action, every action has a reaction. So we are adding coins into a basket, assets and liabilities. And that will determine what we will be, because whatever we say, whatever we do, whatever we think, everything has an effect, good and bad. So it is the material body that undergoes a transfer. The spirit soul stays as it is. And it's untainted. Poor thing, it is struggling. Our Atma is struggling. We have to help the Atma to go back. Upon liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body. The spirit soul bears qualitative semblance with the Supreme. The spirit soul qualitatively is absolutely the same as, because it looks like the parent. No? The child will look like the parent, right? So once it gets out of this contaminated world, it regains its original form, which is the spiritual form. And here Prabhupada also talks about Smriti and Shruti. So I'll just touch upon it very briefly. Those of you who continue to do your studies will read more about it in Ishopanishad. So Shruti is what? Shruti comes from, is spiritual. Whereas Smriti is what is retold to us by those who hear the Shruti. For example, the Vedas are Shrutis. They have been told by the Lord himself. If you kind of look at Vishnu Sahasranama, it says, Vyasaya Vishnu Rupaya Vyasave. Only Vyasa, who gave us the Vishnu Sahasranama, all the Vedas, was a Rupam of the Lord. Because if it was not the Lord's form, that kind of knowledge can never be given by anybody else. That's why Vishnu Sahasranama says, Vyasaya Vishnu Rupaya Vyasa. Vyasa was the form of Vishnu himself. That's why Vyasa is so regarded. So all the Vedas that came are given or have been handed over by the Lord himself. And everything else that has been borrowed from there in the form of the various, the itihasas like Ramayana, Mahabharata, which are like story form, they are smritis. And that's why Mahabharata, Ramayana, all of them have, a lot of things that are borrowed from the Vedas. And they've all been, and smriti also, if you look at some of the differences, smriti also is, I believe, it is kind of packaged in a way that it can be easily assimilated by ordinary people like us. That's why Mahabharata and Ramayana is very freely, told, and it's something which people engage in. Whereas Vedas and Upanishads are very, are high in intellectual content, and therefore it is not something that everyone will relish. Whereas Mahabharata and Ramayana, anytime it's an all-time favorite. Even now during the lockdown time, I know Mahabharata and Ramayana were played and people just enjoyed it. And when something little goes wrong, we saw one film that just came recently, right? So some things didn't go well and people didn't accept it. Right? So that's the difference between Smriti and Shruti, which I just wanted to kind of highlight just for you to understand when you read the purport on your own, so that you know what Smriti is and what Shruti is. So let's read one portion of the purport. I think this is, we are still on 15.7. Okay. Can we read this last para? Hare Krishna, somebody wants to read?
Yes, Mataji.
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
The words. The word Mamai Vamasa. That means the fragmental parts and parcel of the Supreme Lord is also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter which can be put into pieces and joined together again. The conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word Sanatana, that is eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that Dehinosmin Yada. In each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Motion, when liberated from the body entanglement, revives its original spiritual body. Here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one, just as the parts and parcel of the gold are also gold. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. So We are part of that gold and we shall always remain that gold. Just because of our attachments, we get into all kinds of complications. Karshati is always constantly struggling, right? Irrespective of the branches we are, people situated, all the living entities, all the branches are always struggling. It's not that the branches above us are better. Any branch, all branch has its own problem. So here, so what is the result of the, okay, fine. What is the result of this unending desires and attachment? 15.8 and 15.9. The living entity in the material world carries its different conceptions. These are called the vasana. The conceptions are the vasanas. Carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another. And what is the example? The Bhagavad Gita is all about metaphors and allegories and aphorisms. So, what does it say? It carries the vasanas of life from one body to another, just as the air carries the aroma. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. When in the human form, we wear different type of dresses for different occasions. So similarly, in the larger realm of things, the person or the living entity quits one body to take up another body. Why? Because of the vasanas and also the associated karma and activities thereof. So we're going to read Prabhupada's this full purport. It's very nice, and I don't think I'll do justice if I just pull out some points there. So we will read Prabhupada's purport. Okay, this is a short purport. Somebody wants to read? Hare Krishna?
Saraja Mataji, if you want to read, you read. Otherwise,
Anybody wants to read?
then I'll read.
Mataji, you
Mataji.
only read, Mataji.
Okay. Okay, then I'll read. Here, the Hare Krishna Mataji, here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade. And if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change his body undergoes depends upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him on to the next type of the body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or a dog, he is sure to change to a cat's or a dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilations of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. He gets a different body according to karma, and he has to quit this body in due course. It is stated that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. This process of transmigrating from one body to another and struggling while in the body is called karshati, or struggle for existence. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. There's a beautiful example in the I heard in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, nicely written. Yeah, everything is written nicely, but this is so nice.
Yeah, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is written, or rather, Prabhupada says, a devotee very, very longingly looks forward to the morning sun because he gets one full day to engage in devotional activities. And then, just as the sun sets, he kind of thanks the Lord that he's got one day less in his journey to reach the Lord. How beautiful is that?
Wow, that is so nice.
So, Prabhupada and his expressions.
Because when birthday comes, people say that, oh, I lost 1 year. People are sad that we are leaving this material world, but somebody is saying that they are nearer to God. So that's something really great.
So that's the difference between worldly people and spiritually.
Yes, spiritual people. Yes, Mataji.
So 15.9. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Based on the kind of body you get certain kind of sense organs, and therefore there are a certain set of objects that will attract you with the kind of sense objects or the sense organs that one has in a certain type of body. And there's Prabhupada said, a cat will behave like a cat, sense organs of a dog will behave like. So it's not, Prabhupada is just not saying his own, he's saying what, he's explaining what the Lord is, what the Lord is stating in all these verses. Okay. Now, the other thing is, so therefore, these are so well explained. Then why is it that the way this knowledge is understood or is experienced is different? So here he gives us verses 15.10 and 15.11. What are they? Here again, we are going to read Prabhupada's purport, but who can appreciate and realize this knowledge? 15.10. The foolish cannot understand. Who is saying this? The Lord is saying. The foolish cannot understand the Muda. The Muda cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys in the spell of the modes of nature. So remember, the modes of nature are very, very potent. So nobody understands how the modes play havoc in our life, not only the existing life, but also will carry it over to the other cycles. But one whose eyes are trained in the knowledge can see all this. How can they see? It's explained in 15.1. So the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed, where the minds are constantly, going the way the sense organs take it, such people's minds are not developed and were not situated in self-realization. There are never such people who kind of go with the very, the physicality of things around them, their own physical needs, and get attracted to all the, all the glitter and glamour of this material world, will never be able to become self-realized and cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. They may try. They will attend a few classes here and there. They will, you'll find a lot of people, when a lot of these big evolved people come, people are well learned and all come. There's a huge, the conference rooms and, the auditoriums are jam-packed. Tickets are sold at high prices. They may listen, okay, 1 hour, 2 hour, listen, step out. That is not really spirituality. In Tamil, we say, everybody is going to the kacheri. Kacheri means, going for concerts. When during the, there's a Margari season, which is the end of the year, November, December, January. There'll be many concerts happening all over Tamil Nadu, all over Madras, all over Chennai. And people will land into Chennai from all over the world. All the people, all the Carnatic music lovers. Everybody will they'll be hopping in from one kacheri hall to another kacheri, one concert hall to another concert hall. So everybody is going to that. So people normally joke. It's not that everybody understands what is happening there. So everybody is going, I'm also going. So it cannot be like that. Spirituality is not once in a while kind of an activity. Okay, there is something happening that we'll do a saptah, Bhagavatam saptah, 7 days. 7 days I will attend and over. After that, I'm back into my normal way of life. So that's what the Lord is saying. The Lord is saying this. 15.10 and 15.11 is what the Lord is saying. Now we will read what Prabhupada says in both these purports. 15.10 and 15.11. If not 15.11, we should read 15.11 at least, if not 15.10. Please read 15.10 on your own. Let's read 15.11. Let's read 15.11. Hare Krishna Mataji. Anybody wants to read? Okay, I'll read this.
Yes, Mataji, I'll read. I'm ready.
No, it's okay. There are many transcendentalists on the path of spiritual self-realization. But one who is not situated in self-realization cannot see how things are changing in the body of the living entity. What he means, but Prabhupada, there are very many people talking about all these scriptures. So many things are happening all around us. But one who is not situated, one who doesn't actually realize it, cannot see how things are. They're just doing it for the sake of doing it. The word yoginaha is significant in this connection. I think I should read this, otherwise it will be wrong, right? Yatatanto yoginas achainam pashyanti atmani avasthitam yatanto api akritat mano nainam pashyanti achetashaha. Okay, just trying to see. Yeah, the yoginaha is a transcendentalist. So there are many transcendentalists on the path of spiritual realization, but one who is not situated in self-realization cannot see how things are changing in the body of the living entity. The word yoginaha is transcendentalist, is significant in this connection. In the present day, there are many so-called yogis, and there are many so-called associations of yogis, but they are actually blind in the matter of self-realization. They're simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if the body is talking about people who practice all those kind of yoga and all that. Okay. They're simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if the body is well built and healthy. They have no other information. So he says, don't just misuse the word yoga. Yoga is not about just doing some exercise. Yoga is far more superior, far more divine, far more noble, far more rich. They have no other information. They are called yatatanto api akritat manaha. Even though they are endeavoring in a so-called yoga system, which is the Ashtanga yoga system, or maybe a part of the Ashtanga yoga, not Ashtanga yoga, a part of the Ashtanga yoga where there's only about the asanas. They are not self-realized. Just doing a bit is not self-realization. Such people cannot understand the process of transmigration of the soul. Only those who are actually in the yoga system, who understand the karma yoga, who understand the jnana, who is able to engage in the bhakti, they are actually in the yoga system and have realized the self, the world, and the supreme world, and the supreme Lord. In other words, the bhakti yogis, those engaged in pure devotional service and Krishna consciousness, can understand how things are taking place. So understanding Krishna, his ways, and how everything is impacted by his ways is very, very important for self-realization. That's what will make you a true Brahmana. That's what will make you a true Dhira. That's what will make you a true Vedavit. One who understands, one who self-realized is the one who is a Vedavit, who is the person who has understood the Vedas, not just someone who just engages in just to understand or just kind of intellectually kind of regale or enjoy all that is contained in the Vedas. But it's about living the simple life, the simplicity, and with all those qualities that the Lord has been talking about is what will help one to be really, truly that self-realized true Brahmana. Okay. So we'll get back to our slide and go to the next verse. So with this, we end this section. We're going to the next section. What is the next section? Okay. The Lord speaks about how his position as the maintainer of all that he creates. So 15.12 and 13 talks about the Lord's energy that maintains this world. This world is maintained by the Lord. It is Lord's creation to which we kind of attach a lot of affinity, because of which we go through the transmigration process. 15.14 and 15, the Lord speaks about his mercy in helping us to live our lives in the body that we get. It's because of his mercy that we are able to enjoy or fulfill the desires or go through whatever is deemed for that body type that we transmigrate ourselves to. If it hadn't been for his mercy, if he doesn't endow that power in us, we will not be able to exercise the actions or the activities befitting that body type, including the human body. So now 15.12 and 13. The Lord is yet aditya gatam tejo jagat bhashayate akhilam yet chandramsi yet chagnau tat tejo vidhi mamakam. The Lord says, everything is His. He says, Mamaka means His. The splendor of the sun, yet Aditya, Gatam Tejo, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world. It is a sun that kind of comes and brightens up things around us. So that splendor of the sun, that sun and the splendor of the sun comes from me. And the splendor of the moon and the splendor of the fire are also from me. In the next verse, he says, I enter into each planet. And by my energy, he's talking about each planet. There are so many universes and so many multitude of planets. He says, I enter into each planet and by my energy, they stay in orbit and I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetarians. So in other words, everything that we see around us is the mercy of the Lord. So He is a benefactor. He is the one who's giving us everything that we need to fulfill our desires. So I'll just read out a few things from Prabhupada's purport. So the Lord, Prabhupada says, the unintelligent or the one who is in the mode of avidya cannot understand how things are taking place. Because they think that
Mataji, I will read Mataji. Hare Krishna.
You don't need to read Mataji. I'll just highlight it. Because this we not read, because we have to read one or two
Okay.
very long. Okay. So I'm just saving time for that.
Okay.
So Prabhupada says the unintelligent cannot understand how things are taking place. The beginning of knowledge can be established by understanding what Lord explains here. Everyone sees the sun, the moon, the fire, and electricity. There are different universes and solar systems that have different suns, moons, and planets. The sunlight is due to the spiritual effulgence in the spiritual sky of the Supreme Lord. With the rise of the sun, the activities of human beings are set up. Without His mercy, there cannot be sun. No one has been able to understand how the universe and several other universes have really evolved. And that's what our Bhagavad Gita is telling us. Don't even try to understand, just take it as a truth. It's axiomatic. The more you try to do it, your life will be done. Because you can't prove anything. Without His mercy, there cannot be sun. Without His mercy, there cannot be moon. Without His mercy, there cannot be fire, which will help us to, carry out our daily needs. And without the help of sun, moon, and fire, no one can live. These are the basic things that are needed for our life to run. These are some thoughts to provoke Krishna consciousness in the conditioned soul. That's what Prabhupada leaves us, this last line of that verse, of that purport. He says one needs to understand that everything that exists is because of the mercy of the Lord. And these thoughts should provoke our love, our desire, not for the worldly things, but for Krishna. And truly, therefore, become Krishna conscious by appreciating the Lord's mercy on everything. And I would like you all to read 13 on your own, okay? Because he continues on that same, Prabhupada's purport continues on that same note. So we will not read that. We will go to the next section where the Lord is a support in all our activities. Without Lord's support, nothing can be achieved. He has set up this world, and after having set up this world, He's also present in each one of us and gives us the ability to engage and manage our activities. So the Lord here says, I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities. I mean, think about it. We have, when our bodies, when things go out of balance, when we go to professionals, there's very little that they can do because this body has been designed by someone. It's only the one who has designed it can correct it. If anyone else tries to do something, things will go wrong. So the Lord says, I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, which is the spirit, which is existing in us. Outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of food stuff. So Prabhupada here says, according to Ayurvedic Shastra, we understand there is fire in the stomach. Otherwise, digestion can't take place, which digests all foods sent there. When the fire is not blazing, there's no hunger. It's because the food gets digested, there's a new, again, it leaves space for us to, again, fill ourselves in. So when there is no fire blazing, there's no hunger. And when the fire is in order, we become hungry. So fire is a very important element. That's why it brings about, fire is a component, which is a very, very important factor for us to manage our lives. Sometimes when the fire is not going nicely, treatment is required. We go for treatment. And sometimes the treatment may work, sometimes it may not work. But this fire exists in all kinds of entities. And he talks about that. Prabhupada says, there are 4 kinds. That's what Prabhupada explains those 4 kinds of foodstuff. What are these 4 kinds of foodstuff? He said, there are four kinds of foodstuff. Some are swallowed. A child just swallows, right? And when still a baby, it just licks. And there are several living entities which just lick the food. And some chew. Animals, many animals chew. And some swallow as it is. Even as children, we swallow. And as we grow, we chew. In the beginning, we were also licking, then swallowing, then chewing. And some are sucked. So he is the digestive force behind all of them. Whether it is sucked or licked, chewed or swallowed, that force that helps us to do that action is the Lord's mercy. And this is a very beautiful verse, again a memorization verse. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivisto mata, this is 15.15. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivisto mataha smrta jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvayaham veda vedyo vedanta krid vedavid eva chaham. Very, very beautiful. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance. Smriti, mataha smrti jnanam. Comes from me, and from me comes remembrance, smriti, jnanam, knowledge, and apohanam cha, and forgetfulness. And by all the Vedas, I am to be known. Because the Vedas are given to us by the Lord. He is the compiler of the Vedas. I am the compiler of the Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. He has compiled the Vedas, and he is the knower of the Vedas, and he is to be known in the Vedas. And he is to be known in all these scriptures that we are reading right now. Whether one looking at Itihasas or the Upanishads, whatever, everything has the essence that the Lord has left behind for us as the Shruti Jnana in the Vedas. So we're going to read this purport. It is actually should be 50. We're going to read 50. It's a beautiful purport. We can't miss reading it. Let's read 15. 50. It's a long purport. So maybe 2 people can read it if they choose to. Hare Krishna. Sujata Mataji, you want to read? Saroja Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Yes,
sorry.
Mataji, I'll read.
Padingo.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The Supreme Lord is situated as Paramatma in everyone's heart, and it is from him that all activities are initiated. The living entity forgets everything of his past life, but he has to act according to the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is witness to all his work. Therefore, he begins his work according to his past deeds. Required knowledge is supplied to him, and remembrance is given to him, and he forgets also about his past life. Thus, the Lord is not at all pervading. He is not only all pervading, he is also localized in every individual heart. He awards the different fruitive results. He is worshipable not only as the impersonal Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the localized Paramatma, but as the
What happened, Mataji?
incarnation of the Vedas as well. The Vedas give the right direction to people so that they can properly mold their lives and come back to Godhead, back to home. The Vedas offer knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna in his incarnation as Vyasa Deva is the compiler of the Vedanta Sutra. The commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Vyasa Deva in the Srimad Bhagavatam gives a real understanding of Vedanta Sutra. The Supreme Lord is so full that for the deliverance of the conditioned soul, he is the supplier and digester of foodstuff, the witness of his activity, and the giver of knowledge in the form of the Vedas, and as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shri Krishna, the teacher of the Bhagavad Gita, he is the worshipable by the conditioned soul. Thus, God is all good. God is all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, so this is a very important verse, actually speaking. He's responsible for remembrance. He's also equally responsible for forgetfulness, and he is the one who gives us that knowledge. Now, this is very important because if even in our present life, it's so difficult for us to kind of carry it out. We get burdened with all our emotions, and imagine if we have to carry all the emotions of our past lives, and what would we do, irrespective of the body, irrespective of the situation that we are in. As it is, there's a lot of misery. If we have to carry the burden of all the various things, imagine what would happen to us. And there's another way of looking at it as well. He says he is responsible for forgetfulness. And these days we see so much of new age related diseases. And if you really look at it, is anyone able to correct it? No. Because of the various kind of things that we kind of, we bring upon ourselves, these are all induced kind of imbalances that come into place. And who is able to correct it? Because the body machine is known only to the Creator. So does it mean the doctors have no place? No, I'm not saying that. It just means there's very limited things that they can do for us. Very limited interventions can happen when we kind of mess up with our lives. And I can tell you that from my personal experience. Any kind of mess up, nobody can help us. And what did Shankaracharya say? He said, remember that famous Bhajagovindam of Shankaracharya. He says, Bhajagovindam, Bhajagovindam, Bhajagovindam Mudamate, Samprapte, Sannihite. He says, Nahi Rakshati, Dukran Karani. He says, worship that Govinda, worship that Govinda, worship that Govinda. Oh fool, because nothing can save you. Not any amount of education and grammar can say. That thing is about Samprapte, Sannihite is all about grammar. He said, rules of grammar are not going to help you at the time of death. So worship that Govinda, because he alone can help you in this life, and he alone can help you in your liberation as well. So finally, though, very many people say Shankaracharya is Advaita, actually speaking, he also ultimately, said it's only bhakti and worship of that Govinda that can help you from all kinds of worldliness. So will you read the next para, or should I read it now? I'll read it. Okay. Antaha pravishtaha shasta jnanam. The living entity forgets as soon as he quits his present body. That's a forgetfulness. But Lord, if it hadn't been for the mercy of the Lord, see, this particular verse is very important for those who don't believe in transmigration. Lord says there is transmigration. And if you're not carrying the burden, it's because of Lord's mercy. But he begins his work again, initiated by the Supreme Lord. He starts his life all over again. Although he forgets, the Lord gives him the intelligence to renew his work where he ended his last life. So not only does a living entity enjoy or suffer in this world according to the dictation from the Supreme Lord situated locally in the heart. The Lord is situated as a Paramatma. He is Upadrishta Anumantacha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara. He is the benefactor and the beneficiary of everything that we do. So whenever we do anything, he also suffers because of that, because he's permanently present in each one of the living entities. And therefore, when we give suffering to another, we also need to know we are equally impacting that Paramatma who is in that other living entity, whether it is moving or non-moving. So not only does a living entity enjoy or suffer in this world according to the dictation of the Supreme Lord situated locally in the heart, but he receives the opportunity to understand the Vedas from him. And who can understand? Only the ones in the middle branch. That is the human entity. No one else. Remember, he said in the previous verses, the ones in the upper planets are so engaged in their, in all the wonderful, opulence that they have. They don't really think much about what the Lord, the purpose of life, or the purpose of liberation and things like that. It's only the human form which knows all this, because the Vedas have been given to this middle branch species. If one is serious about understanding the Vedic knowledge, then Krishna gives the required intelligence. Aham sarvasya prabhuvo mataha sab. He is there everywhere, and he also says, I am there for you. What does he say? Ananya chintayanto yogakshemam vahamyam. I am there with you. Why does he present the Vedic knowledge for understanding? Because a living entity individually needs to understand Krishna. It is our individual endeavor. We can collectively do a lot of things, but individually, each one of us have our own responsibility, because we have our minute independence. Why does he present the Vedic knowledge? Because the living entities individually needs to understand Krishna. Vedic literature confirms this. Yo asau sarvai vedai gyate. In all Vedic literatures, beginning from the 4 Vedas, Vedanta Sutra, the Upanishads, the Puranas, the glories of the Supreme Lord are celebrated. By performance of the Vedic rituals, discussion of Vedic philosophy, and worship of the Lord in devotional service is attained. This can only be attained by Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Sevanam. And of course, 2 steps further, Mananam and Nididhyanam. You have to remind yourself and also contemplate and introspect. In all the Vedic literature, beginning from the 4 Vedas, Vedanta Sutra, Upanishads, and Puranas, the glories of the Supreme Lord are celebrated. By performance of the Vedic rituals, discussion of the Vedic philosophy, worship of the Lord in devotional service, he is attained. Unless there is devotion, there is no way we can attain him. He has to be constantly called. Catch hold of his legs. His feet are beautiful. Therefore, the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Krishna. Veda Anta. Veda Anta means the end of knowledge is Vedas. And what is it? To know. And who is given us the Vedas? The Krishna. So therefore, the end of all knowledge is the Vedas. And the Vedas help us to understand Krishna. The Vedas give us a direction to which Krishna, to understand Krishna and the process of realizing. They not only help us to understand Krishna, but also help us to get to his abode. The ultimate goal is the Supreme Personality of the God. That is our ultimate Paramadhama. So we have to go back home, back to Godhead. Vedanta Sutra confirms this in the following word. Tattu Saman Vayat. One can attain perfection in 3 stages. By understanding the Vedic literature, one can understand his relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By performing different processes, one can approach it. And at the end, one can attain the supreme goal, who is no other than the Supreme Personality of God. In this verse, the purpose of the Vedas, understanding of the Vedas, and the goal of the Vedas are clearly different. This one verse, Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivisto matah smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedaicha sarvai aham veda vedyo vedantakrit vedavid evacha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas, says the Lord. And Prabhupada says, this verse gives us the purpose of the Vedas and the need to understand the Vedas and the goal of the Vedas. The goal of the Vedas is to attain the Supreme Paramapadam Avyayam of the Supreme Lord. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we move to the next section. The next section has a summary of the Vedanta Sutras. So do you all want to do it today, or you all want to do it in the next class? Hare Krishna.
Next class, Mataji.
Next class, huh?
Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Very quickly, Mataji says next class. Okay, any questions? I will share this deck because I wanted us to do it today. I'll share this deck in our group. Okay, so next class probably we'll finish this and it'll overlap with chapter 16 as well. It's a very interesting chapter. Chapter 16 will be the divine and the demonic, the Daiva and the Asura Bhava. So it talks about the divine and the demonic natures, right? The Lord spoke about the gunas, and now he's going to talk about the divine qualities or the qualities that are virtuous, and also the natures that are not qualities, the qualities that are divine and those qualities which are demoniac or which are non-virtuous. So we will do the last section of 15 and we will also start chapter 16 as well in our next class, and probably we'll continue with chapter 16 on Sunday as well. And that is the next Sunday. Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Mataji.
Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So before I end the class, let me say the prayers. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Have a nice week ahead, everyone, and look forward to meeting you next Saturday. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Same to you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Mataji.